I had no idea. So as we started having these daily press briefings, and my big dumb butt looks in the camera and says, "We're gonna get you. You might as well come turn yourself in now because we're coming." You know, pretty bold, and
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, joined today by a very special guest. His name is Sheriff Pat Melton, and I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, who is this guy? And why is he on? Why are we interviewing him as project managers? Well, Sheriff Pat Melton is, I would say, not even just a local celebrity. He's probably a worldwide celebrity, but he's a celebrity from about over 10 years ago. And I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll kind of get into what made him famous.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm Pat Melton. I was sheriff of Franklin County, the high sheriff from 2011 through 2019. Served 8 years. Through that time period, we got the agency accredited, which means the minimum standards by which we operate. Moved into a new sheriff's office, had a new judicial center built. A lot of firsts for the Franklin County Sheriff's Office here in Kentucky as well. But also, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office is home to the capital of Kentucky and state government. So we host a lot of things. Our judicial system is a super circuit, so they handle all the state cases, which is very unique compared to most circuit court judges around the state. They have their district and their counties, and that's what they handle. So it was an extreme honor to serve as sheriff. And as a deputy before that, and as a police officer today. Currently, I'm still a police officer. Retired after I got beat. Yeah, I've been in with the Georgetown Police Department for 5 years, an amazing agency with great leadership. And I'm just a patrolman there. It's pretty nice. And it's nice to be in a different place in life right now.
Wow, you've done a lot there, and we didn't even touch on why I asked you to come on and share your story, because this is very special, at least for us, because this is the first time you've actually done a podcast and really told this story in long form, correct?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
And I'll start with painting the time frame, and then I'll let the sheriff here tell his story, which is what, about 2013?
Yep. Yep. October
And
14th, 2013.
why don't you pick it up from there?
That faithful day. Um, I was coming from I was going to a meeting, and I heard a deputy get dispatched down to Buffalo Trace, which is not uncommon. And it wound up, I didn't think anything about it. It was a theft report. So I go to my meeting, come back. Well, next morning, a local reporter calls the sheriff's office and says, "Hey, sheriff, did you guys take a theft report from down at Buffalo Trace?" I said, I heard a deputy get out down there, dispatch and get out down there. I don't know what it is. Let me check. Let me check our reports. Let me ask. I'll call you back. So I get it. I still didn't know because I didn't know what Pappy Van Winkle was. I didn't have a clue. I don't
Well,
drink bourbon.
Sheriff, let's pause here and kind of fast forward a little bit so our audience can understand where we're going with this, and that is about the bourbon theft. Because
But wound up.
some people might not know Buffalo Trace and all that live outside of the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, Buffalo Trace is the home of Pappy Van Winkle. Also a host of top level bourbons, Blanton's, Eagle Rare, Buffalo Trace brand bourbon. But the theft report that we wound up taking down there was a roughly $23,000 worth of stolen Pappy Van Winkle. So yeah, and just to be upfront with it. Um, we didn't have a clue. I didn't know what Pappy Van Winkle was. So as we started and dug into this, as once it got back, once I called her back, and it hit, it was like a nuclear bomb went off for us because all of a sudden I'm getting blown up from Louisville, Lexington, all over the state hey, sheriff, what about this? Can you talk about this? We're on our way. Will you do an interview? And da 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 da. I'm like, holy cow, this is just some bourbon, folks. Didn't think anything about it. I still didn't know what Pappy Van Winkle was. Just to say, I mean, I grew up in a very sheltered life. My daddy was a Jefferson County police officer, so I was really sheltered. So I had no idea what Pappy was or the significance and the cult like following that Pappy Van Winkle has. I mean, it's amazing. Um, so once that hit and we started doing interviews, it went worldwide. Um, we started getting calls from all over the world. It was printed all over the world. My mom had friends, and she was getting articles from all over the place. I mean, it was crazy. So, and the next thing I know, we've got satellite trucks camped out in our parking lot every day for about 6 weeks. So, my thought process once this started, and we didn't have a clue. It was a theft report. It was from inside the warehouse. It was in a secure area, and they took it from inside a pallet of stacked boxes. So, I mean, if you walked by, you didn't see it. You wouldn't have thought anything about it. And one of the big mistakes that we made was we assumed that it was a one-time theft, and that's what we assumed going into it. So my plan was to make it as hot as we could possibly make it, which means publicity. If it's going to move, I want to know about it. So you put heat on people. And we had, at that point in time, we had done some really neat things in the area of narcotics. And we had a phone called a text to tip phone. And it was just a regular iPhone. And we had a detective answering it. We shared who answered it and took it, and we'd actually respond to you. So it didn't just go somewhere and then scrub your information. We actually would say, well, how do you know this? Or, well, what about this? Or what about that? So we knew that if we made it hot enough and they started moving this stuff, we're going to know. So that was my plan. I'm going to make it hot. I didn't call the press and say, hey, they came. I didn't have to do any of that. So as we started having daily briefings, I mean, I was having daily briefings about stolen bourbon from Buffalo Trace. As we got into that, at one point I looked in the camera, I said, we're going to solve this case. I
So
thought,
let me pause right there.
yeah.
And, we talk about project management on our show,
Hmm.
and this sounds to me a lot like a project. It's got, it,
It
so,
truly is project management, and in every sense of the word. We call it crisis management. That's kind of what we call it. But crisis management, same thing. Um, but yeah, there's a process, and being a young sheriff, I've been in office 2 years when this happens, and to get dropped into this like I did, I mean, again, I had no idea. So as we started having these daily press briefings, and my big dumb butt looks in the camera and says, "We're gonna get you. You might as well come turn yourself in now because we're coming." You know, pretty bold, and kind of hindsight, looking back is always 2020. I probably wouldn't have done that again, but I did then, and it messed with people. It did achieve what I was trying to do, and we got word through the interviews, and once all this happened, yeah, they all started calling each other, and they were all panicking. That whole organization. So it did benefit to the point that we had their attention, and I was already known as a pretty aggressive sheriff. If you were selling dope or doing stuff, dumb things, making poor choices, we were coming after you, and we're going to get you. And we set some records for investigations here and some criminal cases for trafficking in different drugs, and so they knew I meant business when I said, "I'm coming for you. We're coming after you." So as that happened, as we start going down that path after that day, we wound up interviewing. Detectives went down and interviewed about 110 employees at Buffalo Trace. So you can imagine the organizational and the time the man hours that it took just to do that. And then, of course, we identified, I think, like 10 people that should have been fired for theft just for little stuff. But there was also there was a culture there in the old way that you could get a bottle, you could tap into it and get a gallon jug and get you some bourbon and take it home. It was socially acceptable then at Buffalo Trace before Size Rack bought it. So as a result of that, um, we identified about 10, and all of a sudden it goes cold. Now, here's an interesting point. While detectives were down there talking to these people, they walked around. We did a security assessment for them. We're walking around and they see somebody take the box out, set it by a dumpster, and sure enough, somebody pulls up by the dumpster, picks up the box, puts it in their truck, drives away. And I had two detectives in plain clothes that were, down there going through all this stuff. So Buffalo Trace didn't want publicity. So here I am trying to walk a tightrope because it died. I mean, it goes dead. And I thought, well, this is interesting. It we ought to have something by now, and we had nothing. And so I thought, we're just going to keep making it hot, as hot as we can. And then, Buffalo Trace, I come up with the idea. I said, let's make a poster, put a Pappy Van Winkle bottle, wanted dead or alive, Pappy Van Winkle, and a 10,000. And we had somebody offer up a $10,000 reward. So we did that. Well, yeah, I did too. Buffalo Trace didn't. They didn't like that. Yeah, they're like, yeah, no, we're not. Please don't do that. We don't want to do that. We're against that. We don't want any publicity on this at all because people were saying, and I get it. People were saying, well, this is a publicity stunt. That's all this is. This never happened. Well, I assure you, it did happen. And in retail side, it was $23,000 worth of bourbon. Whether you take $23,000 worth of bourbon from your employer, you take $23,000 over a period of time from a cash register, it's theft. A thief is a thief is a thief. And, so that was an interesting challenge to keep it moving, keep it hot, and it just dies. And we followed up. We got a lot of tips. I mean, we got a lot of tips, and one of them came in from Bardstown, Kentucky. It was a high school principal who collected bourbon and traded it, sold it. And we got a call from a liquor store in E Town that this guy was in there trying to sell a bunch of Pappy Van Winkle. So we never mentioned his name. Yeah, he picked the wrong time to do it. We never mentioned his name. I get a call from a friend of mine, actually a cousin of mine, said, "Hey, man, his attorney, this guy's attorney, is sue happy. Be careful how you step into this because they'll try to sue you. They'll try to put it on you." Well, I never mentioned the guy's name. We finally we made contact, went down to the Nelson County Sheriff's Office. They helped us. We interviewed him there. He had an attorney and was very forthcoming. Obviously, he wasn't involved in it, and we were able to clear him. But his attorney gave his name out and gave statements to the press, which kind of rejuvenated everything again and got it going. Yeah. So as you know, and from there, it died. So it's dead. And we're not, we had followed up all the tips, everything we had kept getting, and I mean we got hundreds, and we followed up
This
on
is
everything.
so this is the second time it's died on you.
Yeah, yeah, died again after that, and then come March 11th of 2015, we get a tip, and that tip was there's 5 barrels of bourbon behind Toby Kurtzinger's house. Gave the address, and it's covered by a tarp. So my detective Holly said, "Hey, Sheriff, Detective Farmer, Jeff Farmer, who is an amazing detective and did a fantastic job for me." Jeff calls and said, "Hey, we got a tip." I said, "Let's follow up on it immediately." So him and my chief deputy Ron White went out there, and they went over. There's a big tire, a radio tire, and they went alongside that to the curtilage. They didn't cross over that line, but and you could smell. They said, "We smell bourbon." And we can see the barrel. We can see a barrel, but you can see the outline of the barrels under the tarp as well. Um, so we get a search warrant, and then knowing that we had to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's, and we did everything double or triple, working with Larry Cleveland, the Commonwealth Attorney, and Zach Becker, the Assistant Commonwealth Attorney. So if a judge or a court would throw out this motion or this one, we had two more ready, and we had it covered. So we always covered our bases. Part of project management, you always look. That's absolutely. So we were ready. I mean, we were ready for it. And so we get a search warrant. We go, we execute the search warrant. And one of the constables, Richard Sandifer, went with us and helped us. And he called Toby because Toby wasn't home. And he said, Toby, you probably ought to get here. The sheriff's at your house. He wants to speak to you. And he said, okay, I'm on my way. And so we did identify the five barrels. And there was five barrels behind an outhouse, an outbuilding, shed behind Toby Kersinger's house. Oh, we get five barrels. And I'm thinking, good God, how are we going to haul these now? How are we going to get them into evidence? How are we going to do that? So I called for a rollback.
So,
Carrie,
so
Carrie,
just
Carrie's towing come and helped us.
for our audience that doesn't know, can you describe how big and heavy a barrel is?
A 55-gallon wooden barrel with steel bands on it is heavy with probably 50 gallons or 48 gallons of bourbon in them.
So
Because
these were almost full already,
they were
or still.
several hundred pounds. Yeah, I mean you had to roll them. I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, they were a lot. Yeah, and people don't realize that when you say you get a barrel, uh, it's a lot. And the thing with the raw barrels like that are all the char still in them. So where the inside of that barrel was fired and it's burnt and charred. So when you pour that out, you got to have a filter because it still has all the char in it, which a lot of people don't realize that. And we learned a lot through the process of this about barrels, the nuts the nuts on the barrel, what they mean. And then all these had been, the top of them had, they're all labeled, and the top had been sanded down and where you couldn't read what it was or where it was from. So all we had was wooden barrels, either KY or AK, depending on where the barrels were made, or TN, depending on where the barrels were made.
And that's the state code, correct?
Correct. State code where those barrels and staves were made and assembled and put together as a barrel. So we had that. So we get them, we take those to the sheriff's office, we execute search warrant in the house. Inside the safe in that house, there was a ton of weapons. And what happened before this, Toby had come to the sheriff's office and in Kentucky, the sheriff signs if you want a silencer or a restricted gun purchase, the sheriff signs for you to do that after a background check. So Toby had come to me before that, never knew him, didn't know who he was, wanted me to sign for a silencer, and I said no. I'm like, what do you need a silencer for? So, and I'm a gun guy. Let me assure you, uh, you know, if somebody's outside with an AK-47, I think you ought to have one inside. Just my personal belief. I'm a gun guy. Um, but I'm like, what do you need? What do you need a silencer for? And I denied it. So then he goes and gets his buddy at Post 12, acting post commander Jerry Wise, to sign it. So Jerry signed for it and gave it to him, let him have it. And I refused. That was way before any of this happened, and I had no idea who Toby Kurtzinger was. Didn't care. I just didn't feel like he had a justified reason for wanting silence, or other than it's cool. Yeah. So we wind up doing the search warrant on the house. He's got a huge gun safe in there. Like, I'm talking, if there's a zombie apocalypse, I want him. I want his safe close to me, and probably him, because he had a lot of guns and thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Yeah. And then there was a bunch of steroids. And you've not heard a whole lot about the steroid side of this. Um, and I say steroids, I mean a lot of steroids. So steroids and bourbon, it's a party. So we wind up, we wind up. I know, right? And so, you know, as we're talking about this case and we're trying to figure it out and what's happening and how to do it, we're trying to decide and determine what the best way is to cross the bourbon side with the steroid side and how do they connect? How do we make that fit? And who's tied to whom? So I was talking to the guys and I said, well, hey, let's just do two lines and just crisscross. Let's cross who's involved with what. And one on bourbon side, one on steroid side, and we wound up doing a cloud approach with it and did it like that. How it all came in to Toby, and so we did that, and then we had an anticipatory search warrant that we had did, and it was for a residence, and there was a shipment of steroids coming in. We had flagged some addresses, and so we knew that it was going what it was and where it was going. So we had a U.S. Postal Inspector, and they were great to work with. Um, they came and did a delivery on the package, dressed as a postman, and then we hit the house as soon as they did that. Took that guy into custody. So we got him, got the package, got the steroids, and he signed for him. And then we arrested him, and then brought him back, interviewed him, and then this thing starts moving. So as we keep investigating and we have a press conference because we want to make it hot. And so we decide we're going to give people the option. Hey, if you bought one of these, we've got some people in custody right now. And the funny thing is, Toby was getting ready to talk, and his wife looked at him and said, "You need to shut the F up right now. Don't say another word." And which was fine. I hate his kids were out in the car. I hated that for him. Uh, but again, we didn't make that decision. Yeah, we didn't make that choice. Um, and I think like the Netflix documentary showed that we trashed the house. We never trashed their house. That didn't happen. Uh, but uh, yeah, but at the end of the day, um, it was a successful search warrant at his residence. There was things that tied him to the thefts, and quite frankly, as the ringleader of the thefts. As this kept going, our case kept developing, and all of a sudden, we had people calling saying, "Hey, I've got this. I've got this bourbon, and it's who we bought it from." We started getting statements. We offered them. We offered them. We wouldn't charge them if they brought it in and turned it up and turned it in to us, and they did. We got bourbon out of 6 different counties. We identified that the distribution was through softball, steroids and bourbon through softball. And these guys played, it was their thing, and they play, and that's what they did, and as a lot of people do. But they'd have a sip of bourbon, and they had a statewide network set up through the softball, and we wound up developing even a better case. Well, the next thing you know, we wind up through this case with I think 28 barrels of bourbon,
So,
three
Sheriff,
barrels and
I was going to say, let's pause right there for a second because
okay.
you just reached for something off camera.
I've got notes. I've got
Okay.
yeah. I've got my case file. I got
I
my
was going to
case file
say,
because it's a lot, and I want to make sure when I talk about it, I'm talking very factual and very accurate. That's important to me personally,
for
that we relay that.
for the video viewers, would you mind showing the case file that you have?
Well, yeah, I've got court documents and everything. This is just the NIBRS report, what we call a NIBRS report. It's a case file, but this has got everything that happened. It's got the details of the investigation. It's got that. This was from my evidence guy, Bowman Stone, and he wrote down exactly what we had in custody. It's also in this, and then where I've done some other things. But this NIBRS that I held up, it basically tells the story. If you can see that, it kind of tells the story: date, time. Here's who we talked to. Here's what happened. So you've got a chronological events of what happened, and it's factual. And again, our job as investigators and policemen and sheriffs, we discover the facts. We don't make them up. We don't embellish the truth. Here's the facts, and here's what we've got. So
So, so once again, framing this in a project sense, your team of deputies were all assigned tasks to work on,
Absolutely.
such as a work breakdown structure.
Yes.
You know, there was risk analysis when you were thinking about getting all these different court motions and legal proceedings. You were doing the risk analysis ahead of time to make sure that if one failed, you had a backup and a
Yep.
backup to the backup.
Yep.
You know, it,
You have to. Yeah,
because
especially.
we are, I was going to say, because we are a project management show, I want our
Yeah.
audience to kind of hear
Oh, absolutely.
how this all works out to be relevant to us, because law enforcement is just an ongoing series of projects every day.
It
We
is.
just don't, you just don't call it the same things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any type of police call, even being a patrolman right now, if we had a fatal on the interstate when I was sheriff, here's my thought process. I want to get a detour set up immediately. I want to clear the queue. I want to make sure the injured gets treated or deceased is treated with dignity, and we want to minimize the inconveniences to the motoring public because time is money, especially with commercial vehicle traffic on the interstates. It costs so many thousands of dollars for every minute that an interstate is shut down. So my thing is, I don't want you to sit there. Let's set a detour up. Let's get you moving. But all that thought process goes into it. Also, what type of equipment are we going to need to remove the crashed vehicles? Is it a commercial vehicle? Do we need, we've worked wrecks where truck engines were thrown out of the cab, knocked out of the cab. And, you've got to get a big truck wrecker to pick that up, pick up the engine, and then the corner scene, it's a lot. And so that project management is legit. And we do that. You kind of do that with every call. Most of them you do. And this case was so significant and so high profile, we knew we had to make sure that we had our I's dotted and our T's crossed. We had to because it was that significant.
All right. So sorry about that interruption. I
Oh, you're good.
just kind of want to keep it a little bit framed for our audience, even though this is something that no other audio podcast or even publication has, which is the guy.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I enjoy, I enjoyed being sheriff here. It was a great honor to be sheriff of this community. My kids were raised here and, everybody else's, and I wanted to make sure my community was safe at the end of the day and wanted to do the best job that I could do serving this community. Um, it's funny just to shift gears just a little bit, but when I got beat, I didn't know how much time I had. I was really worried about what am I going to do? Where am I going to finish up my retirement? So Lindsay and I we go to retirement for a meeting, and they said, "Oh, well, Sheriff Melton, you got more than enough credits for service to retire." And I said, "What?" They said, "Yeah," and I was like, "Really?" Because it was never about that. It was all about service, and I didn't care. It just wasn't. Yeah, I didn't care till I was like, "Oh my
It
God,
came
what am I
time to
going to do?"
care.
Till I had to care, and then I was like, "Oh my God." So, and then they tell me how much I'm going to make, and I was like, "Oh my God, 30." I wound up with 30 years of service. I wound up with 30 years, and I've been back at Georgetown for 5, so I'm considered a police officer R there. So I don't get their city benefits or any of that stuff, but I do get a little higher pay rate because I am retired and I don't draw those benefits. So it's been a good. I'm 58 years old. I'm young enough. I'm in great shape. I'm 115 pounds lighter than I was back when I was sheriff, and so it's nice to do that. But I think that is an important thing because I never knew it was never about that. And I was blessed throughout my career to be able to. I worked in the governor's office, Secretary of State's office, state auditor's office. I was very blessed, and then transportation, where I founded the Highway Safety Office, Drive Smart Kentucky, and took a program from an idea to a program to a branch to a division of highway safety. And we did things that had never been done, especially with engineers. And in the engineering field, and looking at things with the hazard elimination program on some high crash corridors. We identified the 12 highest crash corridors across our Commonwealth, and then we focused the four E's: education, engineering, enforcement, and emergency response on those high crash corridors to improve the motoring public safety. So I've been very blessed, and I've been different to be able to serve and do what I've done.
And for the audience, for for the audience also, Kentucky is not a state; it is a commonwealth.
It is the Commonwealth. Absolutely, it's the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And also your sheriff. Your sheriff is elected. It's a partisan race. The sheriff's offices in Kentucky are a fee-based office, which means, and here's the go. All right, you got to hit it. Um, you may have in the calendar year, and we're on a calendar year budget instead of fiscal year budget. So as a fee-based office, we collected for 7 taxing districts, and then we collected fees off that, and that's how we collected. And then we got $10 off of every citation, the last $10 off of every citation that was paid, whether the city wrote it, state wrote it, or we wrote it. So, with that said, as a fee based office, you may have a $2.3 million budget as an example. January 1, you don't have $2.3 million. You start off broke, and then you earn that, and then when you start collecting property taxes and franchise taxes like Buffalo Trace Distilled Spirits tax, you start collecting those October 15th, and you know November 15th what you really have to spend, and you got 6 weeks left. So hit that moving target. And you got hey, it's not easy, especially when you're doing things that have never been done in a sheriff's office, um, and getting
Or
accredited and performing law enforcement, getting people trained and certified, and get them where they should be. And the expectations were huge of my men and women in the sheriff's office, and they rose to every occasion. They were rock stars.
now you hit on that, and for the audience, I've known Sheriff Melton, and I've heard him speak, and we've discussed this a lot personally. So I'm kind of bringing in some things that I know to prompt him for the audience a little bit, because you you talk about, well, you talk about your office being fee based, and then you're talking about a case like this one where, what did you say, you had 100 interviews, over 100 interviews performed?
Over 100 just at Buffalo Trace on the initial phase of this investigation.
So going into budget, thinking about this, let's broach that topic and go into the budget side of this whole investigation and what that did to your department.
Well, I mean, obviously that's a lot of man hours. And then you've got detectives down there doing that, and you've got other cases that are stacking on either patrolmen, or patrol deputies, or the other detectives, and they're stacked. So, and you can't control if you have a murder or robbery or those things, a fatality, or a major case like this that garnered the attention of the nation, of the world. So how do you prepare for that? You don't. You go along. If you have to go ask for more money and do a budget amendment, you try that, and and see if the fiscal court will do it. The interesting thing with this case was not a lot of people wanted me to find out what happened. They wanted me to just forget about it, sweep it under the rug, and let's just move on. And and it is interesting, but that's the truth. And it. I, there's one thing that I have, and that's my integrity to look myself in the mirror and know that I did the right thing, and what's best for you, your family, and this community. And we knew 3 years before Toby Kurtzinger pled guilty that he was going to serve 30 days in prison or in jail. How does one do that? Well, yeah, yeah,
So so balancing that budget and thinking about all that extra labor that you had to do, and unlike our projects, you couldn't exactly bring in contractors to fill in the gaps.
nope, no, it's I worked pretty much 7 days a week, about 18 hours a day. If Lindsay and I would go out to dinner somewhere and we're sitting in a restaurant, uh, you know, I would speak to everybody, and I was known for that. What should be like a 15-minute trip into Kroger is 2.5 hours because I'd stop and talk to everybody. Anybody that approached, I'd stop, I'd answer questions, I'd help whatever they needed. And as a result of that, we'd go out to eat dinner, and we started going to another town. That sheriff went to another town. The other sheriff come to our town because you're sitting there, and you'll have somebody come, and they don't mean any harm. They come up, hey, I know you're getting ready to eat. You got a second? I need to ask. Can you mind if I ask you a question? Well, no. What you got? Sure. And I didn't mind. But after they come and set your food down, and then you're still going, and then your food's cold. Your food's cold. You're like, you just look. You're like, I'm sorry. you know.
And then you got the
So
babysitter on top of all that.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, and it's nice now to be able to go to dinner and sit down and eat and not have to not you don't get bothered near as much now. But it's still nice. I went to the grocery the other day and got stopped 15 times, but now I'm known as Little Miss Kentucky's dad. That's what I'm known as. It ain't no longer sheriff or anything else. It's Macy's dad. Oh my God, your daughter is so precious. She is beautiful. She's amazing. And so it's a different level now, and it's actually quite refreshing to be called Macy's dad and help her do the things that she's doing for as a 6-year-old. Yeah, so I'm having fun with it. So it's a nice it's I like the attention, but it's great for her to get it all. Yeah, yeah. Just
Well,
support. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and I'm sure that the conversations are a lot shorter now than they were asking. So what's going on with the investigation? What are they not telling me on the news?
yeah. Well, it's interesting because Toby to this day still thinks that I mean he thinks he's God's gift and that he was just providing a service. That's all he was doing was providing a service. And again, a thief's a thief's a thief. If you steal $23,000 in bourbon for your employer, and I mean there was barrels that went out in a Buffalo Trace work truck, and he bribed the guard, gave guard $500, and drove out with a barrel in back of a Buffalo Trace work truck during the day. He also set up supervisors. He set up supervisors. They if they question because and let me tell you this, and just to be very very blunt, Buffalo Trace is an amazing community employer. It's generational employment. 99.9% of the employees there are hardworking, they're honest, they're generational. Their dad, their granddad work there, and they are simply amazing and they do a fantastic job. I want to be very, very blunt with that because I don't think that they get the credit they deserve. And, sometimes one person can make us all look bad. And Buffalo Trace does Christmas lights. They do a big Easter egg hunt. I mean, they're a phenomenal corporate success here in our community, and their employees second to none. They work hard, they're God fearing, and they do a fantastic job. And just because you got a bad egg or two doesn't mean they're all, and they're not. They work hard down there, and they earn their money, and they do a phenomenal job. I'm very humbled to say Buffalo Trace is in my community, and for what they do for our community, it's phenomenal. I know I collected that check that they paid for the franchise taxes and the property taxes. I collected that check, so I know the investment. I know what it costs, and it's huge. And the employees work hard down there, and they're fantastic. And I know a lot of them personally, and but Toby would set, there were some supervisors, and he'd set them up. If he'd set up, they'd position a box somewhere, and then if it was questioned, he was a senior union guy, and I mean he got a couple fired. And then, one day he brought a gun with a silencer. Imagine that. And went out back and shot it in a flood wall. And that's just intimidation. That was intimidating people, no more, no less, other employees, because he walked out behind there and shot it in the flood wall. He knew what he was doing. He was smart. Uh, but that kept people from asking questions.
So I th- so I think that's a good point to kind of find a stop. now we can get to a good stopping point. If you've got a few more minutes of to wrap up your story that we sidetracked you on, because what we're going to do is we're going to make this a two-part episode because there's so much information that the sheriff is willing to share with us and our audience. So, Sheriff, why don't you finish your thoughts and then we'll wrap up and then we'll pick up episode 2 for everyone to listen to next week.
I think in summarizing, especially with project management, this was a huge project. And here's the thing, I didn't have a choice. This fell in my lap. I didn't say, hey man, I'm going to take this case. We're going to do this. That didn't happen. It was just a case that was dropped in our lap and that blew up that we had to do. And anybody that tells you about me, I give 110%. My deputies, some of them are 70%, 75% deputies. I got 150% out of them. Phenomenal teamwork. Um, you know, it was amazing, and the hours that we all worked and that it took. But I didn't ask for this case. This case dropped in my lap, but I had the integrity and the honor to investigate this case and to help lead. And Ron Wyatt, Rick Walls. Rick Walls is no longer with us. God love him. Phenomenal investigator. And Jeff Farmer did an amazing job. We had a couple more detectives. Jake Bonner helped investigate some of it, and then uh, they just did a phenomenal job. And it's all about project management, case management, project management, crisis management, because you never know when somebody's going to come out and homicide's going to drop in your lap. This case, as an example, go worldwide as big as it is. Shane Weber was a detective sergeant at the time on this. He was in on the initial. Rick Rogers. And as they investigated these cases and this crisis management, that's what it was. I mean, I didn't plan on the media being outside in my parking lot for 6 weeks. I didn't plan on having daily press conferences. You know, I didn't know we were going to wind up investigating about 110 employees at Buffalo Trace. Uh, but I do know case management and how we're going to deal with that. And this was a prime example of project management, case management in our terminology, project management in your terminology, and also media and communications management, because you had to be so careful in what you said, how you said it, and not to be accusatory. But again, that's why I mentioned earlier the facts, and we discover facts. We don't embellish, whether it lies here or here. It's fact based reporting. Here's Yeah, and that's
So,
that's where we were. So that's probably a good place to wrap up, and
yeah.
then we'll jump into part two. And I'm excited. I'm excited to get to do this. I'm glad you all get to be the first, because this is a different type of platform and a different host with project management. But what a tie-in! And you all are brilliant for tying it together.
And and it helps that it's somebody you know that's local to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So
I
so
appreciate it.
so with that, I will say like and subscribe, follow on all the platforms, you know, be aware there's a part 2 coming with even more information than this one had in it, with a lot of great stuff. So for part 1 of Sheriff Pat Melton, may all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping.
Amen.
I'm still Trevor.